Hi.
Hello.
Welcome to Brave Space Live, a podcast, a show where we talk about anti-oppression and communal healing. Each week we pick a hard-hitting topic, dive right into the awkwardness like you just saw me display. I'm Tychelle. I'm a trained social worker, educator, diversity, equity, inclusion practitioner.
And I'm Mel. I'm an author, an activist, and a social ethicist.
How do you get the title activist? Well, I want to be an active. No, I feel like I'm an activist in certain
You are
ways.
an activist for sure.
Yeah, I was just having a conversation with Mel, and I was like, I'm a vigilante. I'm a little bit of a vigilante. So anyway, I want to dive into what we're talking about today. So today we're going to talk about, and I saw you talk about this on TikTok in that shirt, so it reminds me of that there. We're going to be talking about traveling while Black. Specifically, I really want to tell you all about my cross-country trip as I moved from the East Coast to the West Coast. I can talk about all the awkwardness that I experienced being an East Coaster on the West Coast, but I really want to talk about the trip, how it went, and dive into what that was like. So, and I know, Mel, you had some questions because I haven't told you really a lot about it, but no. I think it'll be awesome to talk about. And that's also kind of getting into where we wanted to start at today, because we were gone for a while, like 4, 5, 6, I don't even know how many months. 4? I think it was 4.
That was a good long stint away.
So sorry for leaving you all hanging for so long, but we are back. And that was part of the reason that it took us so long. Mel bought a house, like she's a homeowner now. So I don't know how she did that in this economy.
Yeah, we got super lucky. Well, we live in rural New England, rural Maine, so it's a little bit. You know, we're up there with the mosquitoes and the moose and
the moose. And I'm all the way on the West Coast now. So where Mel is, it's like what, 8:00, and where I am, it's, I don't even know, it's 5. So we're coming to you from 2 different time zones through the magic that is the internet. So really wanted to talk about like the trip in general. One, it was really go ahead.
Why you did the trip?
Yes. So my husband graduated from his PhD program, and we moved out here so he could start a job, because the things you do for love are kind of ridiculous. If you would have, and I have this pen in my hand. Sorry, I'm a clicker, so let me put it down. If you would have asked me, I don't know, 6 months before I moved, if I'd be ever moving to the West Coast, California, Oregon, Washington, no, like that's not. Never saw it for myself. I am an East Coaster. I'm from Philadelphia, born and raised, very much like Will Smith says, but you move the things you do for love. So he owes me big time. So we moved, and we also decided to drive across country, which is not something I ever saw myself doing, but we drove because not only the things you do for love, the things you do as a pet owner. My dog is too big to fly in cabin in an airplane, just like literally like 5 pounds too big and a couple inches too long or whatever. And there was no way I was going to ship my new puppy, who will be 2 on Friday.
Risk
so,
it. Yeah. Are you doing it to celebrate?
I already bought him a birthday cake, so.
Of course you did.
I did. And it's here already. It's very cute. You'll see pictures. I'll post them on Brave Space and on my social media. But so we wanted to drive across. So we took a while. We didn't do like let's drive in, because I think it's like 40 hours to drive from East Coast to West Coast.
It's a long trip. Yeah.
It's a long trip. And if you'd have asked me a while ago, how long do you think it'll take to drive across country? I wouldn't have had an answer, because I really hate traveling. I like going. I like being places, but I don't like getting there. So
interesting. How come?
So let's go back into my childhood trauma. My mom, I've always hated driving and being on the road. Like, my mom hates driving. My mom doesn't even own a driver's license, never has. So it kind of it's like, this is when we talked, I think we talked about generational trauma before. This is one of the generational passed down traumas, at least in my family. So I just hate modes of transportation. Like, can't swim, didn't learn how to ride a bike until I was 13, didn't get my driver's license until I was 26. I still hate flying, all of the things. Like, all of the things.
Interesting.
So Yeah, so we drove, but when I say we, I really mean my husband. So I was a passenger, but also I work and I didn't take off. I think I took off like one day to drive, and I worked most of the time from the car with a hotspot, that kind of thing. So what we did was we tried to plan. We did a lot of pre planning, and the thing about traveling, and I think traveling while Black specifically, is you're not really sure where things are. So one of the things that we did, and folks, you can do this too, is you can look up. I think it's like Tougaloo.edu, which is a school. It is a HBCU. They have a list of sundown towns. And I'll explain what a sundown town is because a lot of people don't know that it exists or that they still exist. So a sundown town is a town where when Black people, when years ago, but also still now, they would say for a Black person to be safe to leave before sundown. Like you didn't want to be found in this town, in these towns across the country after sundown. During the day, maybe you weren't welcome, but after hours, you could be hurt, you could be harmed, you could be killed, all kinds of things. And there are sundown towns in like every state. And you don't really think about this because, I mean, it's not something I think about, especially being from a large city, but I think for other people, they probably do, right? So
it's towns identified. Like I know that there's history there, but I'd love to hear you say more about that.
So I don't know specifically how each one of them can be identified. It's usually self-register or people register because this website that I used, and I'll make sure we post it on our socials. This website that we used talks about places that used to be sundown towns, places that when they used to be sundown towns, what they talk about is like what they've done different in legislation, what they've done different in welcoming, how many residents they have of color, things like that. Okay. So, but there are towns where it's still and more unspoken, but I am glad that they have a list like this because for me it was really, really helpful. So we looked at that. That was one thing we did to prepare. Because we're driving across country, so there's Nebraska and there's Idaho. I don't know. I'm from the East Coast and I'm a true East Coaster in that I don't know any towns in the middle. And I'm sorry, you all. Please do not come for me. But there's different places, so we wanted to look at that. My husband was really instrumental in looking at that as well. Another thing we did was go to the Southern Poverty Law Center and find out where all the registered and bigger communal hate groups are, which is another thing you can do at the splcenter.org. Find out where all the active hate groups or supposed hate groups are in each state, which is not something like I don't do on an everyday, but it's wild to do it. So if you haven't done it, please look them up and know at least who you are, who's around you, and where you are. And then so on the other side of it, what we did was we looked at which cities and towns had George Floyd protests, because we figured, and not big counter protests. So we wanted to see, okay, well, maybe this town is more friendly across the country. So we did all three of those each day, on top of looking at weather and road reports and all of that kind of stuff. And I wanted to share that with you all because it's not something that everybody has to think about. Like, I don't know if you've traveled across country or up and down and you've had to even think about stuff like that.
I have traveled across country and I didn't. It actually, so I kind of have a story that, and I want to hear more about this because I understand that there was a paper copy, right? Of this sundown town, like a registry, or like, what was it called? I can't remember.
So there's an actual physical thing called the Green Book.
The Green Book, that's what it is.
Yes, and the Green Book got turned into a movie, but I do not recommend that movie. It's very like centered on like this white character, and it was not, so no. But the Green Book is something that free Black people and migrants had used to talk about where they have traveled and feel safe. So they called this the Green Book. And you could actually, one of my friends told me today when I was telling him about this episode, he said, I think I have a physical copy. Like, there are still physical copies out there. I've never actually seen one. I've only ever looked through one like on the internet, but I would love to get a physical copy because it still exists. So it's wild. But tell me your story.
Well, the Green Book is like the opposite of a sundown town list. Then right. It's like where you can like sit places of refuge. Wow. Mm-hmm. So I got divorced in 2012, and I decided to move from the Bay Area in California to transfer grad schools to Boston. And I was like selling everything I owned. It was like really like not a great time.
One of those cathartic things where it's like, I'm going to sell everything I own, become a new person.
I didn't eat, pray, love. This was completely out of like financial necessity. Like I didn't, I wasn't just like, oh yeah, I'm going to become spiritually enlightened. No, it's like, I have to drive across the country and I can fit whatever I can bring in my Prius, and everything else has got to go. So I threw a
Prius.
I threw a big, garage sale. But I have to say, on the day of my garage sale, okay, I lived in the same town. At my grad school is in the same town as the George Lucas's hometown, like as in like Star Wars George Lucas. And that day, I was like really sad about having to sell all my belongings. I saw George Lucas walking down the street, and he smiled at me, and I was like, "Oh my God, the force
changed my whole life." The force is with me.
The force is with me, George Lucas.
Wow.
I don't know. Anyway, that's really off topic. So I was driving across the country, and my younger sister is also a musician, and our friend Tressa is a musician as well. And they were trying to cheer me up. So we decided to create a little tour. Like, we booked coffee shops, and we were going to play coffee shops across the country on our way from California all the way down to New Orleans and then up to Boston. Or up to Nashville and then up to Boston. Anyway, sorry, this story is getting so long. All to say, we talked to some friends who were from the South, like various like contacts, like where should we go, who should we stay with, what should we do, and we voiced at one point to a friend, I can't even remember the guy's name at the point, but I was like, I am really nervous about driving across the South. Like, I've heard so many crazy stories. Like, are we safe? And he goes, "Oh yeah, of course you're safe. You're white." The words out of his mouth, like, you're young white women. Everyone's going to protect you. You're safe to travel across the country. Literally, wow. Not even covert, just like, oh yeah, oh no, you'll be safe. You're fine if you're white. Like, whoa. I was like, okay. So anyway, yes, literally the opposite experience from you. I didn't have to do any research. You could just show up somewhere and expect to be protected by society because we were like perceived as innocent little white girls. Right?
Yeah. Which is not my experience at all in like almost any time. But
yeah.
So that is, it is wild. I've never thought of traveling across country, so it's not something I had been familiar with. My husband had done some traveling, driving back and forth. His friends, they've driven somewhere. I've never done that. I'm from a big city, so I'm like, drive across the country for why? Like, that's not a thing. That anybody that I knew, and most people would just fly. So we go to what we did was we took a couple different states. Once we got to closer to the West Coast, we had to take certain states because we are doing this also in February. I do not recommend driving across country in the wintertime.
Especially wait, you took the northern route, right? Like
I-80. I don't know. I
don't know directions at all. But like you went through like states, not south. Like you didn't sweep down to like.
No, we went. I think we started and we went up to like Pittsburgh and then across. I don't know. We tried to also, another thing we tried to do was drive only like 6 to 8 hours because my husband was going to be doing most of all of the driving. So we only, and then, when you get out of a city and you're trying to across a, highway or whatever, there's no lights and it's just like pitch black. So we didn't want to do that either. And we knew like we were going to be in the car with our dog and we had to make all these stops, all of that stuff. So we, on one of our first, and I also had to find dog-friendly hotels along the way. So that was another thing that we just had to do, all of these things. So we're looking at these different stops and I'm like looking to see if there are hate groups, and we were fine most of the way. I will stop and tell you before I get to like some of the worst places. I didn't have that many like really overtly racist incidents. Some of the smaller incidents, like going into a gas station, and I can't remember exactly where we were, and I saw two like white teenage kids looking at like pictures of black women on their phone in this gas station, and they were like, and I heard somebody say ew. Before I walked up, I heard them say ew about something, and as I walk up, I'm over like this girl's shoulder, and she they're looking at like black girls with afro hair or whatever, and I'm like, what is happening right now? And they see me, and he like quickly puts his phone away. So I'm like,
weird.
All right. All right. And then the next one was another rest stop. So we're in a rest stop, and I go to the bathroom, and I come out, and this guy who works there is spraying air freshener, but like there was nobody else there. He went back into the employee office, grabbed air freshener, and like sprayed it as I like behind me toward my head as I walked away. And I'm like,
that's
so you just
weird.
You think that I smell like it? So these are kind of like the subtle racist things that I experienced, and I'm just like, I mean, there were, and I want to be honest and say that there, not honest, I want to be truthful and say that there were lots of nice people that I met at rest stops. One girl, I was wearing, somehow it was cold, so I was wearing a sweatshirt, and it had like, Black Girls Matter, Black Thin Girls Matter, Black Nerdy Girls Matter, and some girl at a rest stop, because it's the only place we stopped, it was like, I really like your sweatshirt, and I was like, oh, thank you, and then I realized I was wearing it, so I just walked through the store like this, because there was like, growing across country, there were not that many people of color that I saw in certain towns. Like, they're just population of Black people 12, like not a lot. So that was kind of strange as well. And then for the places that I knew I was going, like I have a friend who's from Kansas, and I was talking to her, and I was like, oh, because we had stopped. My husband's from St. Louis. We had stopped, and we were thinking like, how far can we get to in the next state with like 6 or 7 hours? But because of where we were, if we only went to like Kansas City, that was only going to be like 4 hours. But if we went, so she was saying like stop in Manhattan, Kansas, and we always joke about Manhattan, there being a Manhattan in Kansas, and she was, but it's great to have friends, because she's like, yeah, stop there because it's a college town, so there'll be lots of different people, nicer hotels, and probably better food. I will say, I never thought about going to Manhattan, Kansas, but it was very cute. I had some awesome Mexican food from a Mexican restaurant. It was a college town. I will say the funniest thing that I experienced there was it's a college town, and they're big into college sports in Kansas. So we go into the hotel, and there's what I would call a circle of dads. So there's like a circle of 40, 35, maybe 40 to 50-year-old white guys standing in a literal circle, like all of them. It's like 10 of them. Why? And they're all wearing 3/4 zip up jackets and denim jeans, and each of them had their hands in their pocket. I think I'll have to send it to you, because they were literally all standing there in the same way, and I took a picture of it and posted it on social media, calling it Circle of Dads. And there was one exactly, and then there's one dad who's walking. I think they were coming from whatever conference room, and he's walking with his hands in his pocket. I was like, oh, this is a thing that they do, like dads with their hands in their pockets. So, but that was a nice hotel. It was a really nice hotel, college town. We were able to walk and go get food, very nice coffee shops, talking to some people. So that was nice. I think the hardest stop. Wait, let me stop, because I got told the other day I talk really fast. So now I'm like self-conscious. Let me slow down. Any questions, any thoughts that you had? I wanted to make sure I paused as well, and I'll get my drink of water.
Just the amount of work you had to do. The amount of work you had to do, that like it takes your time on this earth away from your other parts of your life. You know, like the emotional burden and the time burden of that is astronomically higher than people who, white people who don't have to worry about this. It's just, it's something that white folks, I think, just don't think about it. It doesn't occur to us that you would ever have to do that much planning. And like, thank God you were safe. You were safe because you had to take that many precautions. Right. I mean, yeah, it's really tough, especially in a day and age where people there's a high percentage of our population where white supremacy is no longer like hidden, like swept under the rug, right? People are like becoming more and more blatant and proud of the fact that they're white supremacists and xenophobic. They have no problem shouting things, and like, it's like they're like, you can't tell me what to say, so I'm going to say whatever I want, no matter what the consequences, no matter who it hurts, because I'm exercising my individual liberties. There's a lot of the country that's doing things like that right now, and it's anyway. So it's not just an idea. This is impacting your real life.
Yeah.
This is impacting your real life and your body.
While you were talking, one of the things it made me think of was the first kind of misstep that we took. So I was booking a hotel on Hotel Tonight, our first stop in Pittsburgh. And, it's not only like we did this beforehand, because you don't always know where you're going to get to, driving, how many stops you have to take, getting lunch, getting gas, all of those things. So I had booked a hotel on Hotel Tonight. And I thought we were in a parking lot, and I thought we were across. I saw this, like, I don't know, Holiday Inn, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna book this Holiday Inn that's across the parking lot. But I realized when we went to the lobby, they were like, we don't have a reservation for you, and I realized I booked the wrong hotel. So I was like, oh, he's like, but that hotel's only like 20 minutes away. And I'm like, oh, and mind you, it's like 8:30 at night, and I was like, oh, okay, well, we can just drive. And I was like, wait a minute, let me check this in a sundown town. And Hotel Tonight would not give me my money back. They were like, well, you booked it. So that was like, I think it was like $90. And I was like, I'm not staying it. I'd rather waste $90 than drive into a sundown town at night already and sleep there.
Yeah, because you wouldn't sleep, right? Like, I mean...
Oh, no. There was one night of that too, and I'll tell you. So let me tell you about the worst travel day as well. And I told one of our producers that I was going to talk about this, and with not wanting to travel. So my sister-in-law lives in Denver, and love Denver. We drive a Prius, like you talked about, packing up the Prius and driving cross country. So the night we were there, we all decided, I think we were going to get like sushi or something, and Denver, if you know Denver weather, or you told me because I didn't know.
You wear shorts in the morning and snow pants by 2 p.m. It's very weird weather.
Exactly that. We drove in, it was fine, and they were like, oh, it's going to be a couple inches of snow. 6 inches of snow.
What?
But it wasn't, yes, but it wasn't like 6 inches of snow over a period of time. It was like 6 inches of snow, like right now. So by the time we had dinner, it was like Armageddon. It was Snowmageddon. So it's like snowing and snowing and snow. And me and my husband were like, oh, we'll pay for dinner to my sister-in-law for letting us, and my brother-in-law for letting us stay at their house. And we go out to the car and we're like shoveling snow off. And my husband's like, I can't drive in this. Like,
no,
now with a Prius. Yeah. And my brother-in-law, is awesome as he is, they go hiking every weekend. He goes, oh, I drive a Subaru, I'll be fine. And he literally goes to get the food, and we're all like worried. And he comes back and he's like, yeah, you all wouldn't have made it. We all wouldn't have made it. There's a bunch of cars on the road, but he fine in a Subaru. So I heard somebody say, like, a Subaru can do anything. They drove a Subaru through a flood. They called it a Scubaroo. So it's a thing. So we leave the next morning, and if like Mel said, if you know anything about the weather, the next morning it was 45 degrees. Like, and now I know 45 is not like warm, but it's the difference of it snowing the day before and being 45, almost 50 degrees the next day.
Yeah.
But then they didn't tell you exactly.
But then it starts melting.
Yes. So the melting, but no, it didn't. But wait, there's more. It's 40-mile-an-hour winds.
Oh God.
So we're driving through the
Rockies.
One of the worst days of my life.
No.
We're my husband is driving in our little Prius up a mountain, down a mountain, up a mountain, down a mountain, and at some point the snow blows so hard I could barely see him in the front seat. I was sitting in the back because I was on my computer. I was sitting in the back and I could barely see him in the front seat.
Was there literally snow in the car? Wait, what?
No. There was just literally no visibility. So like we could not see anything in front of us. And he's like, I don't want to go fast. 1, we're on a mountain. 2, if I go too fast, I could hit something. 3, if I go too slow, somebody could hit us. Like, what are we doing? It was an hour of me going just praying to all that is holy and sacred, and thinking I was gonna die in a snow globe.
I'm glad you didn't. In a snow globe. Oh, I'm so glad you didn't. I'm glad you're okay. Wow.
It was like the worst. That was the worst travel day, and so I won't recommend driving through mountains
in February. Don't do that.
Y'all don't do that. Don't be like me. Learn from my mistake. So I will say the worst day of like the travel portion, besides like the actual road conditions, was we went to a place called Dillon, Montana. And we had driven through Wyoming or whatever, And the first thing we see as we get off the road in Dillon, Montana, because we weren't going to make it any farther, it was getting pretty dark out, and we wanted to stay somewhere. And is a sign that says Motel the Sundowner. And I was like, the Sundowner? That's a motel.
Oh, no.
And I immediately am like, oh God. So we pick a hotel, and it's a Best Western, which I've stayed at Best Westerns that are really nice. But the thing I didn't like about this hotel was that every door leads to the outside. So it's not like
a driver motel. What do they call it?
Yeah. So you're not like in a hallway inside of a building. Your door just leads to the outside. So we order food, and I'm just like, I'm worried. There's nothing in this town. There's like a gas station, a couple pizza places or whatever, and this Best Western is like not very much. And like the closest town is like 30 minutes away. And I'm just like, oh man. And and the thing is, whether it's perceived danger or actual danger, it feels like danger.
Yeah.
So to me, the girl at the I had booked the hotel on the phone. She was really nice. But once we got into that town, it felt very desolate. It felt very scary. There were not any people of color that we saw. I literally told my husband, like, you go check in, because I don't want something to happen because you're with a black person. Like, so I had him go bring the dog and check in, and I stayed in the car. And then once we got into the hotel room, I was like, we're not leaving. But of course we had to leave because we ordered pizza. And the Pizza Hut was like, oh, we don't have a credit card machine. You got to come pick it up. But then they delivered it. And I was just like, no. Like, so when they came to deliver it, he was gone. And I told the pizza guy through the door, like, hey, my husband's coming back. Cause I look out the window and I'm just like, no, I'm not. Or look out the peephole. And I'm just like, I just don't want to be the only black person in this town and something happened. Like, and it's not because I think every person is dangerous, but you hear too many of those stories. There are stories where a guy went camping with his friends and somehow they find him hanging from a tree. And I just could not fathom that. Because here's the thing, when we read these things on social media, to most people of color, it's numbing. But when you're in a situation where that could be you, you're like, I don't want that. So I didn't leave the hotel room until the next morning. I was staying like, I'm not doing this. So that was probably the scariest thing. I mean, there were some other incidents where we got a lot of looks, or a bathroom was dirty, or people just stared us down the entire time. One, we're an interracial couple. Two, I'm a black person in the middle of whatever, Wyoming, Montana, wherever, and it's not, whatever. So it was very, very nerve-wracking and to think about. And then you also, when you go read this like list of sundown towns or former sundown, now the list does let you like look at a sundown town. It'll tell you what steps they've taken so that it's not considered that, or what, but they still list it. When you look at it, it is long. Every single state, 50 states. I think Alaska doesn't have many, but when you look at this list, you're like, what? I've been there. And it is freaky. So I will say,
look at it. If there's any in my like local area.
I'm gonna look. I'm gonna tell you, because it's wild. I'll look in your state and not tell you. And, I'll look in your state, but it is wild, and it's a historical database, so it has every one. So yeah,
there is man, I have a lot to think. I have a lot of things to say.
All right, I'll read them to you while you're thinking.
Okay.
Bidford, Brewer, Fairfield, General, Magala Island, Milo, Orano, Presque Island, and Westbrook.
I've been to some of those places. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh my God.
Yeah.
It's when you have like literal documented evidence for the fact that racism still is alive and well in our country. And we're talking about like overt racism, like people who seek to actively harm others, right? Like, we're not just talking about like a little fringe of people holed up somewhere. This is like a prevalent and widespread problem still that exists to this day. My question is, like, when you are out and about in the world, I've never asked you this. when you're out and about in the world, and like obviously in places like Philly where you grew up and you're familiar with the neighborhood and the people and things like that, that might be a little bit different. But when you're out and about in the world, like visiting a new place or things like that, how often would you say, like what percentage of your time are you thinking about safety and how to keep yourself safe and how you move through the world, and like, and does that impact your body? Like the way like you experience, because it's stressful, right? To worry about that.
It is. Oh, yeah. It was stressful every single day to like look at a sundown town, like to know. And the list also does tell you, is it a concern? Is it still a sundown town? What was are there ordinances, things like that. So to your question, I think, I'm not going to speak for all people, but a lot of people I know, we live in a city and we don't move anywhere else, right? When you a lot of people live where they grew up, or they are, I'm getting out of this town. Nobody goes, not many people go, I moved from a big city and I'm gonna move to a small town. Like, you don't see, there's not that many people doing that unless they have a lot of right. But unless they have a lot of money, or I'm sorry, a lot of black people don't do that. But unless they have like there's a big thing with like celebrities moving to like Wyoming to buy a ranch or whatever. That's not something that a lot of black people do. So I had never conceived of not living in a major city. My husband and I talk about, when he gets his next job, I want to be no more than 20 minutes outside of a major city for many different reasons. I want to see people that look like me. I want to have a lot of culture. I want my kids to grow up around and be able to get on public transportation and do things and things like that. But so when you were asking your question, it made me think of this first scene in the movie Get Out. Have you seen Get Out?
No.
Oh my God. Well, now you have to. It is a psychological thriller kind of scary movie. Not really scary, but by the end, you kind of want the people to die the people that you think are going to die. You want them to die. So it's a movie by Jordan Peele, who writes about the experience of being a black person.
Oh, I saw a trailer for this. Yeah.
You have to go back and watch it. And it's a really smart movie, because he puts a lot of what they call Easter eggs, where you're like, oh, this means this. Oh, that means that. It's wild. And one of the first scenes in the movie is this black guy walking in a really white neighborhood because he got lost and he thought one street was the other street, and he's being followed by this white person, and they end up, I don't want to spoil it for you, but he ends up like having an encounter with that person. And if I am in a white neighborhood, that is the feeling that I have, right? Like, I'm going to be like, but it's more so like, is something going to happen where somebody's going to call the cops on me? I live in a neighborhood now, in a part of a state that's like not many black people. Like, I always joke that when I leave to go to I travel back to PA for my husband's graduation, that like the population of black people was cut in half. Now there's more than that, but I walk my dog in a neighboring neighborhood because I live where there's not a lot, and this neighborhood is really nice, and you can walk a 2-mile path or a 1-mile path around this neighborhood that's really close to me. But I am not just and I'll tell you one of the things that's the hardest. It's not just worrying about things, it's also investigating every look, every smile. So I'm not just investigating the people that I think that are staring at me. I'm investigating all the people that are saying hello. And it's not that I want to do this. I don't want to look at a person and be like, that person's racist or that person's this. It is my natural reaction to trying to preserve myself. And because you never know when it's going to happen. And what you asking me that question brings up something that happened to me the other day. And I have to live through this. It's kind of like when you're a woman and you get your period, and like you just have to function like it's not like you don't have it, or the rest of or like, yeah, I'm going to go to work but I'm in pain right now. It's fine. So I was walking my dog in this neighborhood, and I do it like probably almost every single day. So there are neighbors I see, and they're like, your dog's so cute. And I've met the groundskeeper who takes care of the neighborhood over there. And he's like, he's the one who told me about the different paths I could take. So I meet really nice people, and I'm always happy to talk to them. And that's the thing. I always have to be on guard as well. I have to, I can't just be like mean mugging walking down the street, which is like something that's natural for me because I'm from a city, and I'm from Philadelphia, and I lived in New York. So you just don't, what are you, a tourist? Like, you have that kind of look on your face. So my natural face is just to walk, and I'm usually like listening to a podcast, but I have to make sure I smile at these people. So here's the thing. I not only do I smile at everybody and say hello who looks in my direction, I also carry my ID because I don't want people to be like, "Do you live here? Where do you live?" And I've had that happen to me. I don't want people. I carry a mask, and I'm outside, so I'm not wearing a mask outside. But my thought was when I first carried it was that what if I get stopped by the cops and I have to get in the back of a cop car? Like I want to have a mask on. So I carry my ID, I carry a mask, I carry everything on me just in case something happens because I don't want them to be like, we can't identify this person.
Oh
right?
my God.
All of those things.
You think about that on a conscious level on a regular basis, like
absolutely.
walking your dog?
Absolutely. And so this is I'll tell you about the incident that happened to me the other day. So I'm walking across the street and there's no stoplights because it's like a community, and I'm walking and this guy and these two younger white guys, probably in their mid 20s or early 30s, are in this like big pickup truck, quintessentially like the stereotype at that point. And whenever I'm crossing the street, I also take the time to like to train my dog when I'm walking with him. So I make him, if there's a car, I make him stop, and I'll always let the car go. So I get to the intersection and that truck's pulling up and he stops. So I look at him and I give him that nod for like, thank you for letting me cross. And I get in the middle of the crosswalk and he revs his engine and juts forward on purpose.
What?
And it wasn't like because he saw me. I nodded at him. I looked at him in his face, and he revved his engine and like moved up to the point. And I'm just like, I jump and I keep crossing the street, and the girl behind the girl in the truck in the car. I don't know if it was a truck. It was a white car behind him. Looks at me and is like, and I'm just like, yep, like this is the stuff that I deal with, and I'm keep walking. Like what am I gonna do? Run in the house?
So not only are you like constantly having to interpret every human around you, every person, every signal, every tiny little like, am I in danger? But you're having to plan for possibly being detained by cops and what to do in case something goes terribly awry. And you have to monitor your own body language and the way you're coming across to make sure you seem as unthreatening as possible.
Oh, absolutely.
All of that just to walk your dog.
Yep.
In addition to like staying safe as a female as well, as a woman, right?
Oh yeah.
Like that's a lot of levels of things that I don't have to do in the world.
Yeah. It's wild to think of, because there are really nice neighbors that I see, and me and my husband have stopped and talked to people, but like people give me a smile, and I don't know if like, did they walk past me and go, okay, this is a black person, because they're lingering. It's so much. And like, I want to walk outside and not have to think about that all the time.
Exhausting. It sounds exhausting. It reminds me of in like trauma responses, hypervigilance, like getting locked, like war vets or people who've been through like a traumatic event, right? Like they get locked, their brain gets locked into a state of hypervigilance where they're constantly like looking around them, almost like paranoid, like what's going to happen to me, or are there any perceived threats in my environment? But what you're describing is not hypervigilance, because you have to do this out of necessity for your survival, right? Right. That's different.
I mean, and I'm from a city, so like my mom always told me to like be aware of my surroundings anyway. Like I play this like game with my husband, and I'm like, if somebody walks past me, I'll be like, is that person wearing a so this and that? And he's like, yeah, how did you know that? I'm like, because my mom said you need to be able to tell what the guy across the street is wearing, because I've had bad incidents in my own neighborhood, in black neighborhoods as well, but it is like investigating every smile. I'm gonna tell you, this is your homework is to watch before our next meeting in 2 weeks, to watch Get Out, because it is wild as a movie, where you're like, oh, that's what's happening. Like it feels, I think what Jordan Peele was trying to do was like, from the mind inside of a black person dealing with this, what is this like? And it's so wild. So it is.
I was once thinking, and this is why it's so important. And I don't want to make this about white people, but I do want to say this for a sec, because it's so important for white folks to understand these experiences that you live through on a daily basis. And I'll give you a really poignant example. I was doing a photo shoot with some young educational guys who were like doing a hip hop program for kids, and I rented like a really nice like shared studio space from some friends. And so I brought these two black guys in, and we were doing like a really nice, photo shoot. And I was all excited because I rented the space and I want to like make it a good positive experience for them. They're just starting out in their careers and stuff like that. While we were shooting, so there were two other people and two other white folks in this space, like working, just like work, whatever. While we were shooting, one of the young men starts getting really anxious. Like he's sweating, he's fidgeting, he's like trying to smile, but he's doing like, he's like got this really fake smile on his face and he's like freaking out. And I'm like, are you okay? Like, what's going on? And he was like, I'm fine. And so he, obviously the pictures aren't turning out well because he's like literally almost like to the point of having a panic attack. I thought he was just like off. And his friend was like, it's okay. Like you can get through this, calm down. But like, if I had known then, this was years ago, what I know now about racial consciousness, I would have said like, I think these other white folks in this space are making this guy uncomfortable. Like there's some sort of vibe happening with these white people, or even if there is no vibe and the white people don't mean anything, this is how the situation's being perceived by this young man, and he doesn't feel safe here. And why don't we just go take pictures outside? It's not a big deal. But I didn't even think about it. My brain didn't even go there. Like I didn't even understand that could be a possibility, that he's uncomfortable in a predominantly white space. Like, I should have been able to make an accommodation for that without like making him feel like there's something wrong with him for being that vigilant, and I regret that. I wish I would have been able to like be there and show up more for him as an ally, but I didn't even it just went straight over my head. So.
I mean, it is a lot of like, the more you know, now you would approach that situation differently. We all have those. It was kind of like, and I have a fantastic mother-in-law, and we stayed at her house for a couple days on our trip, and we were talking about how far we were going to drive into Kansas, and I was like, oh, let's go to Salina. That looks like a good town. And my friend was like, oh no, if you stop before that in Manhattan, this is she told us about the college town. And like I was saying, and my mother-in-law was like, no, you could drive to Salina. That's like another hour and a half and you'll be fine. And I was trying to tell her at the time, I don't know if it's still on there, Salina was like not one of, if we don't make it to there, it's going to be like, there's like sundown town before, sundown town after. And I was trying to explain to my mother-in-law who just didn't get it at that point. I was like, we want to avoid sundown towns, because trying to explain this to people, they're like, well, why? That's not a thing. And I'm like, no, it's a thing. And she was like, well, you're with her son, my husband. And she's like, and I think she was trying to think about like, well, he's a white guy, you'll be fine. And I was like, I don't think you understand. It's not making him safer, me safer. It's making him be probably in more danger, because if people don't take kindly to N-word people, if people don't take kindly to black people, they don't take kindly to the white people who love the black people. Like, that's not a thing. And I think at that moment, I don't think she thought about that. And like, I didn't want to have to tell her that, because I don't want her to think like, your son is going to be in danger for being married to me. But like, that's a reality that we have to deal with. And I just think she was like, what? And I was like, yeah, we have to be careful no matter where we go, what we do. And I'd like to think that, we'd like to, based on how our things that are happening in our country anyway that we'll talk about, you'd like to think that we're in 2022. But this is the reason we have to we tell people all the time, or I tell people when I'm doing DEI work, is that saying that it's 2022 doesn't mean anything to black people. Like, it does not mean anything to marginalized people. When we say that, we just have this concept that time heals all wounds, and that's not true. We have to be working at it. So when people say, I'm not racist, it's like, no, but you have to be anti-racist, because if you're just not racist, that means you're not doing what in people's minds often they mean, I'm not doing something, but you have to be anti that, against that, pushing against it, learning more, teaching people, because it's not enough. Because time doesn't heal all wounds. They say, what is it? The long arc of justice, the long arc of the law bends towards justice, or whatever. I can't think of it straight in my mind right now.
I think that was it. Yeah, but you have to work at it. It doesn't do that automatically on its own. The default is not justice. Like, you're gonna, unless you work against that, we're gonna go back to default mode.
Exactly. Yeah. So, yeah, that's my travel across the country. And it turned out good. I will say, kind of going into we were going to talk about, what's happening this week. Do you want to get into that?
Sure. Yeah. So it's the end of June right now.
Exactly.
Very end of June. And before we do that though, I just want to say thank you for sharing that experience. You didn't have to share that with the world and with me, and I just want to thank you for that. It's, gosh, I wish you didn't have to put up with all that bullshit. I wish that
I wish
was
that all
different from
people
you.
who live in racialized, genderized bodies didn't have to put up with the things that they have to
Yeah.
put up with. So that is why, and I say you're welcome, and that's why I tell the story, because I want other people to learn. And not everybody who experiences that is going to share that, right? Not every woman shares that she's on a period for fear that people are going to be like, you're PMSing and you're faking it, right? Not every Black person is going to share with you that they went through something racially traumatic, or that it is, because people will tell us, maybe you're just making a big deal out of it. I've had people say things like that to me. Maybe he's just a jerk. Maybe they're just a rude person. I'm like, maybe it's just racist. Right. So I share that because I want other people to know and to understand. So,
and no one is entitled to hear those experiences from you. Like I can't demand that you share that with me. It's not that your experiences do not exist for my knowledge or entertainment, but I'm very aware of that. Thank you. And the last thing I want to ask you about that is, how can non-Black folks be more supportive in these situations? Or like, if I see a Black person walking down the street, my first instinct is to like smile and try to make them feel comfortable. Hi, hello, friend, hello. But I don't want to like do that just because they're Black and like make them feel uncomfortable. So like, what advice do you have for non-Black folks?
I think they call it virtue signaling. They're like, I'm a good white person, come to me. You have to be authentic, right? And whatever authentic is to you, be that. So if you would naturally say hi to people, say hi to people, right? But don't be like, oh my God, are you new here? Like the very like, but you can just right. You can just say hello. But also, this is going the teaching moment is going to be the same in every conversation we have. Learn more yourself. So we told you the story. You've heard some of the trauma that I've experienced, because when people are reliving things that negatively happened to them, that is trauma. But if you learn more about it, now you know more. Like you're like, I didn't know you had to think about this. I've never had to think about that. So maybe it'll impact you differently as you walk through the world. The best thing you can do, or the best thing you can do individually, is learn. The thing you can do collectively is, legislate and work against. And if you know that if you go and look at this list, which our producer has already posted and we'll be posting on our social media, you can learn about it and learn about what you can do. Have you been there? Do you live there? Do you know people there? What can you do? Have you talked to your Congress people? I don't know, that kind of stuff. But learn. You got to do the learning on your own as well. So thank you for asking that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for sharing.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about what's been happening this week, in the past, in June, right? Kind of thing, and to where we are. But I want to start with the good before we get into the hot mess that is America, right? So it is June 29th, which wasn't New Year's like yesterday.
This year's felt very long for me. There's been a lot.
She's like, actually, it's June 45th, and it's
New
too
Year's
long.
Feels like 8 years ago. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, somebody said that. Somebody said to me the opposite. They're like, I thought 2017 was like yesterday. I'm like, yeah, it's like a both and. Like we've been here all this Groundhog's Day, and also what it's
like
Back to the Future. Yeah, exactly. So, we're at the end of Pride Month, which is fantastic. Father's Day just passed. I've gone to, I don't know, did you do anything for Pride? Did you celebrate in any way? Did you talk to any people? I've gone to some events, but I want to hear about that.
I did celebrate in my own way, as the B member of the LGBTQ. I was going to go to Pride in a major city near me, but I got sidetracked gardening because I'm a happy little hippie, and that's what happened. So I meant to go, but I was like, oh, the city, and there's parking, and where am I going to park? And I don't have anyone to go with. And I just, holed up I'm getting old. That's what happened. Like in my 20s.
A parade in the cold outside. Yeah, I get it.
Well, it's not cold, but yeah. No, in my 20s, I was like marching in Pride. I had my like rainbow wig, and I was like, yeah. And now I'm like, I'm going to garden and plant my tomatoes. That's... So yes, of course.
Do you at least have rainbow tomatoes in your garden?
I have rainbow corn.
Oh, see?
Yeah.
Be gay in your own way, or be bi. Any,
I'm gonna
I
make
don't know. I don't know
rainbow
how to.
popcorn. Yeah,
Exactly. Oh, that'd be
exactly.
great.
Yeah.
I went to a couple of different events. I didn't go to any parades because I'm really serious about making the space for the people and not just like me as a straight person just co-opting being like I love rainbows. Like I hate that when people are just like this is a party. I'm like there's a lot of meaning behind this. So I've gone to some events. I went to an event that was talking about children and kids yesterday. I went to an event about trivia, and I was doing really, really well in the trivia until somebody knocked me off in the question because I didn't know the answer to when was the first lesbian kissed on television on network television.
Oh, the first kiss? I don't know the
Oh
kiss.
no, I'm sorry. It was the first
The first
lesbian wedding.
the wedding. Wasn't it on Friends?
It was, and I
It
did
was?
not know that.
Yeah, Carol
And Susan,
and Susan. That
they had it
groundbreaking. Yeah,
exactly. So
true.
I did not, and the thing is, I'm a fan of Friends. I just didn't know that was the first one. But
Yeah,
I was doing well with like Harvey Milk and Stonewall riots and all of that. I lived in New York City. I have some
nice.
LGBTQ friends. I've been to Stonewall. It was amazing.
Mhm.
I've been to Stonewall more than once. It was amazing. I've gone on tours. So and I have a brother who's gay and a sister who's gay. So and friends who are gay. So I always try to get my knowledge and understand that without them having to educate me. So and trying to actually be an ally if I say I'm an ally. So I've gone to a few events. I didn't go to any parades. And then we also had Juneteenth this month, which is June 19th.
Yes. Oh, question about this. Is it appropriate to say Happy Juneteenth?
Yeah, I think it's happy. I mean, it's a
It's okay.
happy occasion. Yeah, you can
Okay,
do a
good.
happy Juneteenth. It's not like you can't say like happy Yom Kippur to Jews because
Right.
because it's
That's not.
not that day. You can say happy Rosh Hashanah. You can't say happy Yom
Yeah.
Kippur. So yeah, happy Juneteenth is. I went. There are if you don't know and you are looking to celebrate in your town or where you're from, you can go to you can Google Juneteenth events in your town. They come up. I went to a Juneteenth event in my town, and apparently it's like the oldest in the entire state. It's been happening for 40 years. So that was
Cool.
wild to hear. And I met literally probably every black person in the entire neighborhood, in the entire city.
That's a good way
It
to
was
do it.
wild. I was like, since I've lived here, and I've lived here, 4 or 5 months, I had not seen that many black people. Like, I've seen like one delivery person, and we're like, hello. One person in the neighborhood, I'm like, hello. And I go there, and I'm like, black people. There's a TikTok where the guy goes, if there's not no niggas, no nigger, and he's like, I don't want to do it. And I go, and it was amazing. It was great to see. And there were other people there as well. It wasn't like exclusive, but I met some DEI council members for the city.
Nice.
They had one of the, I think, national football teams came out, which we are not where the football team is located. So to see them, they had food, they had dancing. I got to do the electric slide. It was great.
Nice.
And I met a couple black women who told me where they get their hair done, which is going to be important. And I met one woman, and she was like, "Oh, you have to meet my friend because we call her the mayor of Blacktown. She knows where all the black things are." And I was like, thank you. I would love to meet them." So hopefully, and I met a couple people who do some volunteer work. I got signed up. I got my registration to vote changed. So
Nice.
that was great. And it was a woman who is in like a Sigma Delta. I don't want to get it wrong. Please, Divine Nine, don't come for me. But she has been doing it for the last 30 years, like registering people to vote. And I was like, oh, I just moved here. She was like, I got you. And I was like, this is amazing. So it was a great time. Fun was
Those
had by all.
those local I'm so glad you had a good time. Those
Thank you.
local networks are so freaking important. Like we want to talk about like getting involved in politics and being a citizen and being a neighbor. Local politics are where it's at. Local organizations, food pantries, registering people to vote. That is really where the real work of politics and government and justice happens in so many ways. And it really reminds me of like what you were talking about earlier. Not to jump back to what we were talking
No,
about
no,
too
you're
much,
fine.
but the networks of people who are like creating the green book and like communicating with
Mm-hmm.
each other on a really local level, like let's compare notes, let's get together, let's keep each other safe. Like the older I get, the more I see how important those local networks are for like the health of our society. Like, go get involved. If you're not involved in stuff in your neighborhood, go do it. Go volunteer. Go do it, because that's really like our country isn't by default amazing. What makes us great is our active participation, right? We are only as great as we care about our country. So I'll get off my soapbox, but that's very
just
cool.
Put it away for a second, because we'll have to bring it back out when we talk about the not so great thing. Also, Father's Day, and I will say I was called on Father's Day because it was Juneteenth fell on Father's Day this year, and it's Pride Month, so I just kept calling it Gay Black Father's Day. So to all the gay Black fathers, it was your day. It was amazing. So I called it that. But yeah, to the not so great of Roe v. Wade and our country. So that's why I said just tuck your soapbox away, because you'll have to bring it back out to say the same exact things you just said.
Yeah, here it goes out again. I just.
So how did you feel when you heard? Were you expecting it? Were you?
I was expecting it because of the leak like 5 weeks ago. Really frustrated that Congress hasn't done anything to prevent or to legislate or in some way codify it. So I'm a religious scholar. I'm trained as like in theology, and I studied Christian theology for 10 years. I have a master's of divinity. So for me, I see the danger that's happening on a theocratic level of theocrats, really conservative Christians trying to legislate their religious beliefs into law on behalf of the rest of the country and not being satisfied with pluralism. For example, pro-choice is a pluralistic stance. It's really a false dichotomy, pro-life versus pro-choice. You're either pro-life. The true dichotomy would be pro-life versus pro-abortion. Pro-choice is just saying it's neutral. It's saying whatever you decide, do that and stick by your convictions and live according to your convictions, make decisions according to your convictions. It was never meant to be a liberal thing. It was meant to be we're not going to let the government decide this.
Exactly.
You do what's right for you. But that's not good enough for people who are trying to push their religious ideals. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with having a religious conviction about this, but it is wrong when we're supposed to live in a pluralistic society where we don't have a single religion that we respect, or Congress shall establish no religion, right?
Right.
So for me, not only Roe, but in the same week, I believe 2 other Supreme Court cases have been eroding the separation between church and state. There was one about prayer in schools where a football coach was fired for praying with his students before a game, but the Supreme Court overturned that and said that he's allowed to pray with his students before a game. And there was another ruling where private schools could get governmental funding, public taxpayer funding for their schools, which, again, like, it sounds like I'm saying religion is bad. I'm not saying religion is bad. I'm saying there's a reason we have separation of church and state. We have fought long and hard to have a separation between church and state, because when you combine church and state, you combine religious doctrine with the law, which is literally the power to enforce things. You combine religious doctrine with the power to enforce religious doctrine. That's too much power in one place. No one should have that much power. Religious communities and religious leaders function pretty well when they are actually separated from the state, and they can keep the state accountable. They can act as a moral voice, an ethical voice in the best of cases. But when you combine those two powers, in history, it never works out. Never. Like, people forget that Nazi Germany was a theocracy. If you read Hitler's speeches, they read like sermons. He's talking about Jesus all over the place. Like, being a religious person does not protect you from abusing power. So the separation of church and state is as much to protect the state as it is to protect religion and the church and religious communities. So when I see this happen, when I see theocracy, and there was a candidate in Georgia, I'm blanking at her name. She's a GOP candidate in Georgia. A couple months ago, she just said in a stump speech for her candidacy that she said the words, "Don't talk to me about church and state. We are the church and we run the state." We run the state. So we're talking about theocracy that is not covert anymore. It's just like, oh, I wish we would, get back to our values as a Christian nation. No, literally people are saying that like conservative Christians should run the country on behalf of everyone and determine morality from law. Which I think is so dangerous. It's like mind-blowingly dangerous.
One of the things that I think about that makes me think is that like when people came to, and this is, you know, we're getting, and I'll get into a little bit about this, what it means for people of color and things like that and how that looks, separate from a little bit of the theocracy, is that religious persecution was the reason that Americans were supposed to become, or that some of the English were supposed to be coming here because they were being persecuted. So how to you turn around and then make it so for people here, and that was one of my thought processes in the vein of theocracy that I think is pretty wild, is that we have a majority, we have people who are in the majority, right? But that doesn't mean that they should run things. There's a I think it's in Florida, there is a synagogue that is suing their legislation because in Jewish law you should be able to get an abortion because you value the life that is there, and you can't, how can you tell someone else who doesn't have the same belief system that they have to believe what you believe, period? Like, I think that's a wild thought process.
Yeah, the Talmud specifically says you need to prioritize the life of mother. You might know more about this than me, because you're married to a Jewish man, but yeah, there are religious persuasions, or like me as a pagan, I really do believe it's unethical and immoral to bring a life into the world that you can't support and don't want, right? So I believe abortion is an ethical choice according to my religious and spiritual beliefs. And also, to talk about the intersectionality of this too, Black churches are not the ones who are calling for theocracy. This is specifically a white Christian nationalist problem.
Right.
So we can't just look at race. We can't just look at religion. You know, we can't just look at these like separate demographics, but to bring those things together and say like, this is specifically conservative white Christians trying to do this, trying to roll back our freedom of conscience. And it's not okay. And eroding privacy in the process.
Right.
It's not okay.
So it's interesting. So somebody asked me, I think the day after it came down, and what I thought, and I was like, I don't feel any different, but maybe it's because I don't feel the urgency for myself. And I live in a state where it's still legal. But one of I told someone that I knew the same thing I did after Trump was elected. I had a lot of very liberal white people being like, I can't believe this is happening in our country. And I remember specifically talking to one of my students when I was working at a college when Trump was elected. And I said, the day you are waking up the next day after this, and now you feel how Black people feel. We feel all of the time. And this is what you talked about, that hypervigilance, that constantly being on guard. Like, this feels familiar because we've never felt like we had full rights. Now, there are a few Clarence Thomases in the world, but for the most part, it feels like, oh, you're trying to take my rights away. We've been saying this all along. So I said to a white woman, I feel like I did after Trump was elected. I feel like this is something that I've lived with my whole life because people will criminalize you, right? There is a mother who was jailed for sending her children to school in a different district because that district had better schools.
That's right. I remember that case, yeah.
And it was long. Like, I think they gave her like 20 years or something like that.
Oh my God.
Or no, I think it was 6 years, and they gave a Black woman 20 years for shooting a gun in the air to alert herself, alert her human trafficker. Right. So like it feels all too familiar, and that's the saddest part, because will it affect white women? Absolutely. But this is not the first time. Should not be the time that white women, the only time that white women have woken up and thought, oh my God, I can't believe they're doing this to us, because they've been doing this to us for a long time. Right. So I did say that and this woman said, oh, I never even thought about that. I said, because if you're only fighting for the rights that belong to you, then you're not going to see the ones that belong to other people. So if there's if marriage equality is not set for LGBTQIA plus people shouldn't be marching by themselves, because it's not their issue. So that was one of the feelings that I've had. And then and I think the other portion is kind of what you talked about at the end, this whole white supremacist. It's not, so when someone else I heard was talking to that I had a difference of thought process with was they're not overturning it, they're turning it back to states, and states to have the power, for states to have the rights.
Okay, yeah, okay. You can pretend like you care about that issue, like not you, but the person who's speaking. I know. I've heard conservatives say this too, like, oh, but
Right.
we need more states' rights. Here's the thing: there are like a dozen states enacting trigger laws right now that criminalize abortions. Who bears the brunt of criminalization in this country? People of color, right? You just said they get much longer sentences, okay? Yep. And in almost all of these states that are enacting trigger laws, abortion is now a felony. What happens when you get convicted of a felony? Not only do you go to jail, and if you're a person of color, you go to jail way longer, but what happens?
You can't vote.
You can't vote. This is voter disenfranchisement of women in particular.
Right. And then to even go further on that, when we think about, from a historical view, when we talk about states' rights, it just takes you back to constitutional states' rights, right? In Clarence Thomas's letter, he said it's not in the Constitution. Well, neither were women, and neither were people of color.
No.
So when they were people. Right. So when the Civil War was fought over states' rights, it was states' rights to have slavery. Right? So if we're now giving the power back to the states and we're talking about states' rights, it's a lineage that goes straight to that. So when we think about this is a document, and I had a classmate one time say, the Constitution don't even slap like that. And I was like, I laughed so hard because I was like, it was a document written by people who owned slaves, who, had thoughts about what they wanted for themselves. So when they were talking about freedom, they weren't talking about women.
Nope.
And they weren't talking about people of color. So how do we reconcile what that looks like? You know what else is not in the Constitution? The right for Black people to vote. The interracial marriage, even though that's the one thing Clarence Thomas didn't talk about because he is in one. But I actually just saw a thing about that his he was in an interview about his wife years ago, and in the interview his wife's uncle said, we liked him so much we forgot he was Black. And I was like,
great. Yeah, great. That's nice.
So it's just a wild thought process to think about what that means, and trying to criminalize people who will cross state lines, and having to make escape plans, and talking about going camping and all of these different things. It's just,
and there are other states passing sanctuary laws, like I think it's Connecticut or Rhode Island, saying like, if women flee here to get an abortion and can't return home because they're going to be prosecuted, we will take them in, no questions asked, and we will
Canada and California too.
We won't extradite them. Right? Like, what a time we live in. This is just crazy. Like,
and we are always, one of the things I always think about, sorry to cut you off, is we always talk about this from what other countries are doing and how they're treating their people. And America's like this big, come in and save you kind of person. And it's happening here. Like, other countries are I've watched this video of this man in Ireland talking about how bad America is, and how we should make it so that people can flee America and take up sanctuary. There is a movement of people of color moving out to more tropical places like Mexico City and places like that, and returning home to Africa to just like not have to deal with what's here. So it's a wild thought. Because and then the thing I wanted to bring us home on talking about it, and not just that it affects all people, all women, all people, is the people who are, and this is something I tell everybody when I'm doing facilitation, is that look at the groups that you belong to. The darkest and the poorest people are always going to be the first affected, and that doesn't matter whether we're talking about education, climate change, and now abortion, right? There are women, and I was watching this because you know I'm a student of TikTok University, but not like just dances, but like actual TikTok, the old lady TikTok where I'm making food or watching educational videos. And this one person talked about how this is after the leak, before the decision recently. They worked at an abortion clinic, a man. And they would always have to get there at like 7 because their first appointment was at 7:30. And one day he was out partying until like 3 a.m. and he was like, if I drive home, it's going to take me 45 minutes to drive home and then drive back. And he wasn't drunk. He was just like, I'm tired. So he's like, so I'm just going to go to the parking lot and sleep in the parking lot of work because I'm going to have to be there, leave my house and be there at 7 o'clock anyway. So he got woken up in the parking lot because he saw cars pulling in at around 6. And he was like, what's happening? And it was a bunch of black cars. And he goes in and the doctor rushes him out and is like, you can't be here. And what he realized, he ended up getting fired. But what he realized was that there were a bunch of rich white women coming before the clinic opened to get their abortions.
Of course they were. Of course they were. And they're hiring cars, I assume, if they're like
right, because it's not traceable to them. They're not in their car. Absolutely.
If you have money, you get these freedoms in our country. Right. If you don't have money, you're tough cookies.
Right.
Yeah, and it's
one aspect. Okay. Go ahead.
We should do a whole episode on this because I have a question. We had a different listener question, but I want to put this one in instead. Okay, so I recently had a conservative white person ask me like, well, I oppose abortion because it like Planned Parenthood like targets Black women and
people
Black
of color, eugenics.
In the whole eugenics argument, because like who is the person who founded Planned Parenthood was a eugenicist. That's true. Right. That is true. Right. So do you? I mean, but it's also like, okay, if abortions are most accessed by like poor women because poor women can't afford to support more children, right? And women of color happen to be lower income, then it just kind of stands to reason that Planned Parenthood is often going to be in neighborhoods of color because because of generational wealth imbalances. That's where low-income people live who also happen to be like, not magically, but who are also people of color. So, I mean, do you think you can really make the argument that Planned Parenthood like targets women of color?
I mean, there are many things that started from origins that were not so great, that were tainted, that people utilize, right? I've been to a Planned Parenthood. The first time I got STD testing in my life was at a Planned Parenthood, mostly because I didn't want to tell my mom I was sexually active. So it's not like that's the bulk of what Planned Parenthood does. They do a lot of care.
6% of them, yeah, absolutely.
Right. So can it be that it started from poor places? Yes. But here's the thing. I think I hear less about Planned Parenthood and more about, and we'll talk, and I know a place where you said we should do a whole episode. We'll be talking about adoption soon with a friend of mine as well, who has been through the adoption process on both sides, him being adopted and his children being adopted as well, is that you will find places outside of abortion clinics, outside of Planned Parenthood saying we can adopt your baby. But what we don't really talk about is that most people give their babies up for adoption and they say, and that they've done studies on this, that if they had $10,000 more, they would have kept their child, right? So they don't have their children. So are there places that will, and then, a lot of people who give up their child for adoption are young, right? So they're preying on these young women and they don't know what's going to happen to these children, and they go onto this market of whatever, right? So could Planned Parenthood be a problem? Yeah, many of the institutions that we utilize are a problem. Like, you can't get away from it. So I think that I don't think that, so, and I'll be frank and be honest about myself. I don't believe in abortion for myself.
Yeah.
And I say that also because I haven't been in a position where I've had to get one.
Yeah.
Right. I haven't been, but I can't say that would I utilize one if I needed to? Sure. I haven't been in that position, and I've tried to make conscious decisions that I wouldn't have to be in that position, but that's also negating the fact or not entering the fact that I haven't had any adverse sexual experiences happen to me, right?
Yeah.
So I don't want to get one, so I'm not going to get one, right? That's the way I enter into that. But it's not the one, abortions are not only a part of like family planning, it's also for health. A fetus is not viable in most cases until 24 weeks.
Yeah.
The reason that that whole old adage that you don't tell people you're pregnant before you're 3 months is because babies pass away. And it's not like you're naturally passing them, right? Sometimes they have to be removed, and all of these things that people are not considering, especially because most of the people making the laws don't also have uteruses. And I also want to say,
nor do they have medical degrees.
Right. One other thing I really want to stress is that we have to stop saying this is a women's issue, just a women's issue. It's an issue of anyone who has a uterus. Because there are trans and non-binary people who also have things happen to them, who also are trying to get pregnant, who also, and like we can't act like that that trans and non-binary LGBTQ folks don't experience sexual assault, right?
Yeah. Yep.
We have to, understand that as well. So it's not just a women's issue. But when I say women, let's think either that or women with an X, because women is an umbrella term for lots of different types of experiences under the umbrella that is women. So I want to make sure I make that distinction. But if you need it, you should be able to utilize it. I can't say that Planned Parenthood is good or bad, but that's not where all abortions happen. Abortion clinics happen lots of places, and I want some people to be able to access the medical necessities and the medical things that they need, right? I don't know if I can even answer your original question to say, like, is it eugenics? Is it not? Like, people will stay. You can, and this is what I was originally saying before I even lost my train of thought and went down a whole different rabbit hole, is that some of these places that will take your baby and they will also medically sterilize you. There are women who were medically sterilized not knowing that's what was happening to them. So when you have an abortion, you can still, for all intents and purposes, you're still able to have other children. But people are medically sterilizing. And there was a woman who was in a mobile bus doing this, a white woman, saying that, like, you're too poor to have children, or you're on drugs, so I'm going to medically sterilize you for your own good. And she was giving people who had substance abuse issues money. And a lot of people were like, well, that's good because they won't raise children who are addicted to drugs, and they can't be good mothers. But you don't know what that's like. But or women there are white women who can people should be able to go to rehab if that's something. There are people who end up in very bad places and overdoses because of their substance abuse issues and their substance abuse disorders, but not everyone. And to take that choice away from someone is wild. So it's not as if Planned Parenthood is out here being like, we're going to sterilize you. I haven't had that happen or heard of that happening in this day and age. But so should we know the history? Absolutely. But should people be able to utilize the things that they need?
But to your point, like, the question itself is kind of misleading, because the way this person asked the question was like, as if Planned Parenthood was all they're doing is providing abortions. Literally, like 96% of their services are like mammograms and pap smears and all like the women's care, like healthcare that women need, especially women who can't afford health insurance in this great country of ours. So yeah, I think the answer to that question too, and I think I'm agreeing with like what you're saying, like, yeah, problematic past, but also there's a lot of good that organization has done. But also, if you don't want to take advantage of that organization, don't go there. There are other ways to.
I mean, Planned Parenthood is not the only place that you can get an abortion. I actually traveled to an abortion clinic with a friend of mine, and I didn't necessarily agree with the choice that they were making, but it wasn't my choice, and that all they needed was my support. Yeah. Right. And also we also have to, and I want to say this as a last thing to the abortion conversation. Most of the people that get abortions already have children, so you're taking away people's mothers, right? Because are you going to criminalize and then put in jail? Because we're trying to create another cycle of white supremacy and poverty. You're going to take away these people's mother if they decide to get an abortion, even though they already have children. And then what are we doing with those children? Putting them in a system that doesn't care for them? Yeah. Like, it's a wild thing. And also, my most clever, but I told you I'm a student of TikTok University. One of the most clever ones that I've heard of is that, like, people say that a fetus is a child. I'm not disagreeing or agreeing with you, but then I should be able to claim them on my taxes before they're born. I should be able to get child support before they're born. Yeah. Because there are doctrines, and there are, I think there's a religious belief in, I think it's Judaism, but I could be wrong. So please correct me in the comments, folks, if you know differently. You are not alive after your last breath, so you can't be alive before your first breath. And you people can argue amongst themselves. I want people to be able to, although I don't want people to have to get abortions, or although I don't want an abortion, I want people to be able to utilize the services that they need. And the one thing I wanted to say about on the theocracy debate of it all, your religion is supposed to lead how you live life.
Yeah.
So when you say we can't do that because of my religion, you should be saying that I can't do that because of my religion. I can't do it.
Not you we can't do it. Yeah.
Because to the point of, as you said about the Supreme Court, for the coach that was praying with his team, is it a bad thing? No. But are we going to let a Muslim, a pagan, a Jew, all of these people, right, a Satanist,
also pray? Yeah. Which is like, yeah, you have to. If you're going to open the floodgates, yes, you have to let all those people pray. It's the same thing that happened
with the people on the plane that were singing a Christian hymn or something, and it's like, is it bad? No. But if a Muslim got up on a plane and wanted to sing a prayer in Arabic, would we feel the same way? So right. it's this supremacist ideology that certain people have the rights to do things and other people don't.
Yep.
And or the prayer in school. I stopped doing the Pledge of Allegiance in second grade because I just thought it was a wild thing to do. Like, why am I pledging allegiance to a flag? Like,
you are a vigilante. Look at that, since childhood.
I also that same year.
Yourself from now on. Hello, my name is Tychelle. I am a vigilante.
Yes, second grade I stopped doing the Pledge of Allegiance, and my mom was like, they said to the school, Tychelle won't stand or won't do this Pledge of Allegiance, and my mom was like, well, I can't make her. Like, what do you want me to do with that? And then fourth grade I wrote my first essay about why, I'm not gonna say how many years ago that is, but it was in the 90s or early, it was 90s, why people, why LGBTQ people should be able to get married.
Nice. You're seriously ahead of the times. Like, that's amazing.
So, and I won an award for it. So a plaque.
Nice.
But so yeah, I live and let live. It should be was supposed to be what was happening. I mean, although when the Constitution was written
as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. We should wrap up. It's getting late, but
I know I was about to say that.
It's been an awesome conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We got an amazing lineup for the next season, season 2. We've got 9 more episodes of this season planned out, and each of the episodes have been produced, and the topic has been chosen by us along with our producers. So our producers are really actively involved in the show as well. You'll get to meet them all at the end of the season. But yeah, this is a grassroots show. We are not paid to do this work. We're doing it because we're passionate about the work, and we're excited that you all are joining us.
So what do they say on YouTube? Like, share, and subscribe. We'll say that.
Like, share, and subscribe.
And find us wherever you listen to your podcast. I do want to say thank you so much. We'll be back. We are moved to last season. We did every week, and that was hard and not sustainable. So we'll be doing it every 2 weeks. So you'll see us here in 2 weeks. You can go to bravespacelive.com and all of our social medias and find our show schedule, what we'll be talking about, who our guests may be a week before, a couple days before. You'll find that out. And if you want to be a guest, if you have questions, send them to us on Facebook, on Instagram, on TikTok, every place. Send us your questions. I'm trying to convince Mel to do a mailbag episode. So you may see that this season, or definitely at the top of next season if we don't get to it this season.
Yeah.
Because we want to hear your questions. We want to talk about we want to be able to answer things you want to. Because with an author and a social ethicist, as we always say.
Yeah.
And an educator and a DEI practitioner, like, why not ask us questions? So
absolutely,
we look forward to it. We look forward to connecting with you all again in 2 weeks.
In 2 weeks. We'll see you soon. Have a great day.
Bye, y'all.